to promote your business? Do you want to talk about your nonprofit organization? Do you want to talk about your culture? Introducing the online web TV, Afrique Today. Fogham. You can watch us live at the same time on 4 platforms: Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and using the Afrique Today app. Download our app today for Android or Apple. Promote your business today. For more information, go to www.afriquetoday.com. Afrique Today, the best of digital TV.
En vue de performer vos compétences et intégrer l'espace de l'entrepreneuriat digital, la nouvelle Chambre de commerce nationale et la nouvelle Chambre de commerce USA-RDC, en partenariat avec Diaspo Academy, installée aux États-Unis d'Amérique, vous offrent des sessions de formation en entrepreneuriat digital à des coûts réduits. Ces formations vous permettront d'intégrer le monde numérique et améliorer vos compétences en digital au bénéfice de cette terre d'avenir et grand marché qu'est la République démocratique du Congo. Pour participer aux formations, envoyez vos contacts WhatsApp au +243 99 073 0795. Enregistrez-vous aujourd'hui car les places sont limitées. Diaspo Academy, la plateforme des professionnels du digital.
Elite Soccer Youth Development Academy invites you to the 9th Annual ESYDA Award Banquet 2020. Saturday, November 7th from 10 a.m. till 1 p.m. The banquet will be structured differently from previous years, ensuring everyone's safety. Please save this date, Saturday, November 7th from 10 until 1. For more information, go to esYDA.org. Media partner, Afrique Today TV. Afrique Today, the best of digital TV.
Do you want to promote your business? Do you want to talk about your nonprofit organization? Do you want to talk about your culture? Introducing the online web TV, Afrique Today. Fogham. You can watch us live at the same time on 4 platforms: Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and using the Afrique Today app. Download our app today for Android or Apple. Promote your business today. For more information, go to www.afriquetoday.com. Afrique Today, the best of digital TV.
Evening and welcome to Afrique Today. And we are glad to be here with our wonderful, wonderful Senator Chris Van Hollen. And I want to thank everyone for coming on with American Africans United. And my co-host, you have me, Dr. Yvette Butler-Yaboa, and my co-host, the Invisible Man.
Hello.
And today we have an exciting post-presidential debate discussion with Senator Chris Van Hollen of Maryland. And let me tell you, I am really excited that he's on today because this is my favorite senator, not just because he's from Maryland. I'm from Maryland because I'm going to tell you, one day this man will be our president. So I am really glad to have Senator Crispin Holland on, who's a good friend, um, mentor, and all that you can talk about. So, Senator, thank you for coming on today. So we're going to go right into our discussion because we had an interesting night last night, and we're having an interesting year. So I'm going to go right into the questions. Usually we start our show with a video, but this time we don't need any videos to start our show. We only need you. So thank you. And Senator, can you tell us a little bit about yourself uh, and how this year is shaping up for you before we go into our questions?
Well, Dr. Butler, it's great to be with you on the show, and thank you for all your leadership in our community. This has been a very traumatic time for our country. Of course, we're dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic, which has killed killed over 220,000 Americans and had a disproportionately harmful impact on communities of color. And of course, we're also seeing the pain of the economic fallout on so many families and workers. And the tragic thing is, it didn't have to be this bad. It's been made this bad because of the total indifference from President Trump and his refusal to address this in a serious manner. And of course, that leads me to the second pandemic we've been experiencing for the last 4 years, which is a political pandemic brought about by Donald Trump and the fact that he seeks to elevate himself, to lift himself up by dividing the country, by pitting Americans against one another based on race and ethnicity and religion. And that's not who we are in America. And it's essential that we come together and that we continue to march toward progress. We are far from perfect. We have a long way to go to achieve our goals of equal justice and equal opportunity and equal rights. But Donald Trump has tried to take the country on a U-turn for the last 4 years, and we need to make sure we get back on the path and accelerate our efforts toward a more perfect union with equal justice for all.
Senator, thank you so much. And let me ask you, because we were looking at your Facebook page last night, and I want to just ask, because on you have a clip of the late Honorable Elijah Cummings from Baltimore. Can you describe any of your memories of just in working with him?
I have so many memories of Elijah Cummings. I first served with him when we served in the Maryland legislature together in the House of Delegates. And whenever Elijah Cummings got up to speak, whether it was in the Maryland House of Delegates or the United States Congress, everybody listened to what he said. He had that booming voice. He had that moral authority based on his own life experience and then the work that he did. And I always remember his sort of last words, public words, during the months leading up to it before his death, where he said, "We are better than this. Our country's better than this." And then he asked the question. He said, "When we're dancing with the angels, what will be said about what we did, each of us, to help save our democracy?" That was a question that went to the heart of this moment. And we all need to be asking ourselves at this moment, what are we doing to save our democracy? And of course, we're now 11 days out from an election, and we do all have an obligation to go out and make our voices heard at the ballot box. And when I do that, I will be thinking of Elijah Cummings, as well as my other really dear friend, John Lewis, Congressman John Lewis, who of course put his life on the line for the right to vote. And we should always remember that a lot of blood and sweat and effort has been expended to try to ensure that everybody has that right to vote.
Yeah, and I was going to say that too, because we lost two great legends over this past 4 years. And it's really disheartening, on Capitol Hill. And I'm hoping that the people who are in their seats are doing the right thing and really feeling the legacy that they left behind. So I want to change to our great debate that we had last night. Give me your opinion of the presidential debate last night. Now, we know the last one was a total debacle. I mean, the whole world and country was kind of like concerned about the very first one. So give me your opinion on last night's debate.
Well, Dr. Butler, as you said, the first one was a total train wreck and disaster and embarrassing for the country because the President of the United States constantly interrupted. So in this debate, they had to change the format, as we saw. 2 minutes each uninterrupted, where they had the power to turn off the microphone so that the president could not constantly interrupt. So this was a more, it's hard to call this a tame debate, but it was a little more traditional debate, except for the fact that, you know, the president, even when he's not yelling, he still just can't help himself and repeatedly lies. And let me say, I've really never said any previous president was a serial liar, whether they were a Democratic president or a Republican president. But that's what we got from Donald Trump. So while he said it in quieter tones, he still spent the night lying. I thought Joe Biden did a good job of trying under these difficult circumstances to explain what his policies and positions are and how he would lead the country. And we saw very different sort of visions of how we're going to go forward. Joe Biden, somebody who says we've got to take the coronavirus seriously and spelling out what steps he would take. Joe Biden recognizing that we're at a moment of reckoning in this country when it comes to racial and social justice. Joe Biden talking about how we need to focus on science and facts, how we need to deal with climate change and the impact and harm it does here and around the world. So Joe Biden spoke to the real challenges we face here at home and around the world. And I just saw Donald Trump once again engaged in a litany of lies and denial.
Yeah, and on that same topic with the coronavirus and COVID-19, he said, you know, the last night the president's saying, you know, we're doing good. You know, we're turning the curve. Compared to what the president said last night, how do you think Maryland is doing with COVID-19?
Well, Maryland did get hit hard early on, and we continue to suffer here in Maryland, both in terms of people contracting the virus and people dying from the virus, and of course the economic fallout. But Maryland has worked together, all levels of government, all communities and counties, to work to try to bend the curve here in Maryland. And we have been successful, although we do see these upticks, and we need to be very careful about making sure that we do more. I will say that I think we still need more widely and rapidly available testing here in Maryland. If we want to open up safely, we need more of a strategy for testing. When it comes to the overall state approach, I organized a letter early on to Governor Hogan in urging that the state collect the information about the impact of COVID-19 broken down by zip code and by race and ethnicity. I'm glad the governor agreed to do that. And then we've sent a follow-up letter saying, okay, now that we see the disproportionate impact on communities of color, we need to make sure that we're directing our assistance to those who are most in need as well. But overall, I would say Maryland has done a decent job here. And that's, of course, while we have a president of the United States who, you know, tells people to inject bleach and says that this thing's just going to go away. The only way to get it to go away is if we follow the advice of the medical experts. We wear our masks where they say we need to wear our masks and social distance as they direct.
Now, on that same topic, you know, I've been personally affected by COVID, and I know many, many other people have. You know, we've had 2 deaths and many more to come. Do you think that we're going to be heading into a second shutdown? And do you think the whole country needs to be locked down? And will we get there if we need to?
No, what we need to do is adopt safe procedures based on what the medical experts tell us, that will govern how quickly and to what extent we reopen, certain parts of daily life. I would like to see us able to get school kids, especially younger school kids, back into schools as quickly as possible, because I think that they're falling farther and farther behind. Of course, I've been pushing very hard. I was pushing for closing the digital divide long before this pandemic hit. I had introduced legislation to close what we used to call the homework gap. And now, if you're not connected to the internet, you have a full-blown learning gap. So we definitely need to make sure we provide equal access to high-speed internet, but that's still no substitute for getting back into the classroom. That being said, we have to make safety a priority, and that means deploying rapid testing in our schools, and as Vice President Biden said last night, providing schools with the resources needed to ensure that students and teachers can safely return. So my view is that we have to reopen in a safe and more calibrated manner based on tracking outbreaks of the virus, but that this president, because of his failure to act and his failure to develop a comprehensive strategy, has caused thousands more Americans to die than was necessary, and has caused much more economic pain than has been necessary. And so my bottom line here is, let's listen to the healthcare experts. Yes, we want to reopen, but we need to calibrate it in a way that meets the safety priority.
Thank you. Thank you. Now let's really get into what's getting ready to happen next week and what's been going on across the country. Voting. And so we know that it's very, very interesting. So much is happening and different states are doing different things. But let me just ask in general, do you think the Afro-descendant vote has been taken for granted by the Democratic Party?
So I understand the cynicism and frustration. I don't think the Democratic Party's been taking votes of the African American community for granted, but I do recognize and share the incredible frustration that we've not made more progress on so many fronts, whether it's police accountability, whether it's restoring the Voting Rights Act, whether it's on economic equality. But as Joe Biden said last night in response to a question on some criminal justice reform issues, we have had for a long time now a Republican Congress that has blocked progress on these measures. So, for example, right now in the United States Senate, Mitch McConnell, with the Republican majority, has blocked the George Floyd Police Accountability Act. He's blocking the John R. Lewis Voting Rights Act. He's blocking the bill to increase the national minimum wage to $15 an hour. He's blocking the legislation for equal pay for equal work. He's blocking legislation on gun safety and universal background checks. So I totally understand the frustration, which I share, that we have not made sufficient progress. But it does come down to votes, whether it's at the federal level, the state level, or the local level, in order to get these important measures over the finish line, which is why, in addition to making sure that we elect Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, we also need to have a Democratic majority, not just in the House of Representatives, which has been passing these bills, but in the United States Senate, so that we can move them forward. Because I understand that we are not making progress at anywhere near the pace that we need to. That needs to change.
Now, Senator, as a lot of our viewers are from the African American community and from the community minority community. And as an African American myself, and also ADOS, the African descendant of a slave, and we have seen disenfranchisement across the country, just massive disenfranchisement. And just to take a note back, I was passing out literature last night for the campaign, and I ran into a lot of African American males who just feel, why should I vote? My vote doesn't count. How would you, what can you say to our audience who are in that sentiment? Why should I vote? Look what they're doing across the country. What could you as a senator say to someone like me to make me really want to get out, be excited about it, and vote?
Well, because despite the slow pace of change, the only way we're going to be able to accelerate change and progress toward equal justice and social justice is to have a majority of people who want to move in that direction in the House, the Senate, and of course the President and the White House to do it. And I can say that the one thing that would make Donald Trump happier than ever is if he is able to discourage people from exercising their right to vote, because every person who doesn't show up at the polls to vote for Barack Obama, Barack Obama was, in my view, one of our greatest presidents, but and Vice President Biden was a great partner. Anyone who doesn't show up to the polls to vote for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris this time is essentially bringing a big smile to the face of Donald Trump, who has, as I said earlier, tried to lift himself up by dividing the country. I would just point out that in the United States Senate in 2017, we blocked the Republican effort to destroy Obamacare, to destroy the Affordable Care Act by one vote in the United States Senate. But for that one vote, they would have already succeeded in eliminating access to healthcare, direct healthcare for 20 million Americans, and would have exposed 130 million Americans with pre-existing health conditions to an insurance system that allows insurance companies to either charge you unaffordable rates or deny you coverage entirely. That was one vote in the United States Senate. Now, of course, they're trying to jam through the Supreme Court nominee, Amy Coney Barrett, Judge Barrett, so that she can be on the court 1 week after the election to overturn the Affordable Care Act through the courts. They were unable to do that through the democratic process. So my point here is there's an example of a very important health protection measure that we saved in the Senate by one vote. Every vote in the Senate counts, and every vote in those Senate races and the presidential races counts and results in different outcomes. You mentioned the efforts to suppress the vote. The Supreme Court in 2013, on a 5-4 vote, again, one vote margin in the court, took a big bite out of the Voting Rights Act. And the result of that was states like Texas and North Carolina and other states that had been covered by the pre-clearance provisions of the law started erecting barriers. And we need to pass that Voting Rights Act update. That is sitting in the United States Senate, as I mentioned. So your vote matters in terms of these big issues in the direction of our country. And that is why John Lewis put his life on the line for that right to vote. So despite all the frustration and the lack of fast progress, the way we will move forward is by getting a majority that wants progress and wants our country to live up to the promise of equal rights and equal justice and equal opportunity.
Thank you, Senator. Now, I'm going to stay a little bit on this voting because it's really important, because next week is, early voting here in the state of Maryland starts, and we've already had mail-in starting for the whole month. Now, what is really the difference of when you look at the presidential voting, and how important is it to, versus your local and state election? Could you tell us what the impact is of your federal your state voting for the president versus your local and state elections?
Well, they're all so important because, at the federal level, of course, we set national policy. So, for example, that Voting Rights Act restoration and the George Floyd police accountability legislation, Justice and Policing Act. But that said, many of the critical decisions that impact people at the state level or at the local level do come from those local decisions. So, for example, here in the state of Maryland, the Maryland General Assembly right now is looking at the issue of police accountability in Maryland, because even if we change the law at the federal level, you have laws in place at the state level that have obstructed and made it more difficult to deal with police accountability issues. And then, of course, at the local level, what the county councils or Baltimore City government do have a direct impact. And I do worry that people don't pay as much attention as they should to the state and local elections. And the reason we know that is when we see voting fall off. So people will go into the ballot box, they'll vote for the presidential election because that's getting all the public attention, but they sometimes then don't even cast a vote on some of the other matters, including sometimes local referendum on issues that could dramatically impact people's quality of life. So, for example, here in Montgomery County, Maryland, there are a number of provisions on the ballot box that would make it hard for the county council to invest in important priorities. So it is very important that everybody pay attention to races, including the school board, including local referendum and local candidates, as much as they do at the federal level. Of course, the federal level does set the tone for the entire country, and so that's critical. But these other races directly impact people's quality of life.
And so, yeah, they do. And so, because that was something I really want people to understand. And a lot of my viewers, they look at only the presidential race, not understanding that your local races affect you directly. The impact is a direct impact on your everyday life. And we're really trying to get that point out there to people that looking at who's running on your local ballot is one of the most important things that you have to think about, because you don't see them on TV debating. And so you need to really do your research on the issues and the people out there and vote, I would say, and make an informed vote and not just go in the poll and be nervous. Because one of my young ladies who called me just yesterday, she was so concerned about who are these people? And unfortunately, that is something that a lot of us don't think about because we don't see it and it's not right in our faces. So thank you so much for that. And sticking with the voting, let me ask you a question. Now, have you ever heard of the self-determination movement of the Afro descendants? Have you heard of that movement at all?
I'm generally familiar with the movement. I don't know all of its agenda, but I am generally familiar with it.
All right. If my co-host, can you tell Senator a little bit about that?
Yeah. Hello, Senator.
Hi.
And Dr. Butler. I'm invisible, but y'all was going at it. I'm just looking at the questions, thinking where I could jump in. Self-determination is an idea whose time has come. There are those who are, and you use the term Afro-American, but the term Afro-descendant has been accepted by the United Nations. So that defines people who were victims of slavery, particularly in the diaspora. Self-determination, very briefly, is the idea that those who choose should depart from this society and go to a land where they can build their own society. And along with that, the thing that reparations is, I was at the hearing last year where they were talking about it. It had been passed to Representative Lee from Representative Conyers, who passed. So there are those who are seeking reparations. So how do you feel? Are you in favor of reparations? And if the people who say that they are tired of America, they want to quit America, and that they have been denied reparations, are you in favor of the reparations being given to them so that they can depart with it? Does that make any sense?
So I understand your question, and you mentioned the bill that the great late Congressman Conyers introduced.
Yes, sir.
Now introduced by Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee. I am a co-sponsor.
I saw your name there.
I'm a sponsor of the legislation that's been introduced in the Senate. I was the sponsor in the House when I served in the House, and now in the Senate, Senator Cory Booker
Yes, sir.
has introduced the legislation. It's S1087. It's the Commission to Study and Develop Reparation Proposals for African Americans. So my view is that commission should examine, all the issues that people bring to it. We do need to continue in an active manner to address the gross inequities that were created right from the start with slavery and the continuing injustices we've seen. I think the whole journey of America and the story of America is to work to meet that original idea and promise of equal rights for everybody. Obviously, we have a long way to go. We've made, in my view, substantial progress down that road, but we have a very long way to go. And I hope, this commission can play an important role in recommending the way forward.
Okay, I appreciate that answer, but let me be direct. If people say they want to leave America, would you support giving the reparation funds to them to do so?
As I said, my view is that this commission that was proposed in the legislation should examine all the proposals that are put before it as to the best way to address these injustices. And then I will look at those recommendations.
Okay, so you open-minded. That's great.
As I said, I think this commission's role would be to look into exactly the kind of question you just raised.
Okay, partisan and bipartisan. Can you explain that for people who don't know the difference, like me?
Well, bipartisan is when you have members of both parties coming together to agree on a piece of legislation. And so, for example, I've introduced a number of bills in the United States Senate that do have bipartisan support. Unfortunately, these days it's become more difficult, and especially with Donald Trump in the White House, he has been incredibly partisan in his approach. And in the United States Senate today, with Senator Mitch McConnell, you see somebody who has taken sort of partisanship to a new level and engaged in the gross abuse of power. We're witnessing that right now with respect to this Supreme Court nomination, where Mitch McConnell changed his own standard and rules, did not grant President Obama the ability to have his Supreme Court nominee heard during a presidential election year. And now, at a time we're closer to an election than ever, we have the Republicans proposing a new Supreme Court nominee closer to election than any other time in our history. And I just mentioned that as an example of the extreme partisanship we have seen from Senator McConnell.
Final question. In terms of America has been the signal to the rest of the world about elections, and with the discussion about perhaps kidnapping a governor and all kind of stuff going on, is there actually going to be a decent free election, or do we need UN observers to sit around the polls to make sure that things are done correctly?
Well, we certainly need to be incredibly vigilant, and I know that the Biden campaign is very focused on exactly this issue and making sure that we have the ability to respond to incidents at the polls. It is really important that people not be scared off from going to vote, because that would simply give Donald Trump exactly what he wants. You mentioned the plot against the governor of Michigan. I mean, this is a domestic terrorism plot, and it needs to be handled that way. We need to make sure that we count every single vote that's cast. And, you know, my view is that we have systems in place, and the Biden campaign is putting systems in place to be on full alert and address any of those kind of situations. But I'm glad you raised it. We just need to be careful that nobody is scared off from going to vote, because that is what Donald Trump is trying to accomplish. He's trying to scare people from going to the polls when, in fact, we need everybody to cast a vote.
Thank you very much, Senator. Dr. Butler, go ahead.
Yes, and Senator, I know you don't have a lot more time, but I want a few quick more questions. I want to just take one step back and go back to reparations really quickly. And it's not on, we didn't talk about this earlier, but I want to ask you, what do you think about what the governor of California is doing on reparations? And is that going to be effective? And if it is effective, is that some kind of model that we can take across the whole nation?
Well, I'm not familiar with all the things that the governor of California has proposed with respect to reparations. I am working on a number of criminal justice reform measures based on actions the state of California, the legislature is taking, and Congresswoman Karen Bass, who's the chair of the Congressional Black Caucus, introduced the bill in the House. I introduced it in the Senate to establish different approaches to responding to incidents where a police response is not only not necessary, but can lead to unnecessary escalation. So we just very recently introduced a bill called the Community Response Act, where in so many instances where there's an issue of mental health or substance use or homelessness, instead of dispatching the police, we have a mechanism where we can send people who are experts at trying to address those kind of situations so that we do not have a situation that leads to unnecessary escalation and unjust death. So I have been working on some California models on that kind of legislation.
All right, thank you. Just really quickly, now defund the police has been this great word and buzz thing. Can you explain a little about defund the police, what it means, and where do you stand? Because I believe people are taking it out of context and they're not understanding what really defund the police means. And tell us where you stand.
Right. So we're not talking about, at least I'm not talking about eliminating the police. Where you have a violent situation and a police response is necessary. I break this down into two different pieces. One is we do need constitutional policing. We do need police accountability. And that is what the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act is all about. I'm a co-sponsor of that legislation. And it establishes a system for more transparency, more accountability. It bans outright certain practices like chokeholds and no-knock warrants. It would eliminate this doctrine that has been created by the courts that essentially shields misconduct. So that's a very important part of it. But the other part really focuses on the legislation I just mentioned, where we actually should not be asking the police to take on responsibilities where they do not have the training and the expertise, and where a police encounter and response can lead to unjust deaths. And we've seen, of course, tragically, way too many people of color, Black men and Black women, killed in those encounters. And so the legislation that Congresswoman Karen Bass and I have introduced would be systemic change, and we would provide resources to jurisdictions around the country, cities, counties, states, that develop an alternative, both emergency response system to these other kinds of situations like mental health, like substance abuse, and also take more preventative, proactive measures engaging communities in the first place. So that's the way I envision this kind of systemic change taking place.
Just we have only few quick questions, and now how are we on time with you now to make sure that we can get these? I want to make sure I get that last question in about your future. How much more time can you give us, Senator?
I have just a few more minutes.
All right.
Thanks.
Well, I'm going to try to get two quick more questions in, and thank you so much again for all your time. Now, and I know you've heard of Sean Combs, and he's organizing an all-Black political party. Any thoughts on this and how would it and what can it do to the two-party system as we see now?
Well, as I said earlier, I certainly understand the incredible frustration and cynicism about the lack of faster change. In fact, I share that. I was joined the protest, the Black Lives Matter movement, and other protesters outside the Capitol demanding change. But in order to change that through our laws, at least at the national level, we of course need to bring that movement inside the United States Senate and actually get the votes to make it happen. Whether it's the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, whether it's the legislation I just mentioned with Congresswoman Karen Bass, whatever it may be in terms of moving our country forward. And so the issue would be, what's the most effective way to ensure that we get the votes in the United States Senate for this kind of change, and in the House, and of course in the White House, having a president and vice president. So, obviously everybody's free to establish whatever political party they want, but I hope our goal will be to bend that arc toward justice more quickly. And I would just say that to do that, at the end of the day, in a democratic system, you need to have the votes. Now, there are lots of reforms I think we need to make. We have a system right now, as you know, based, for example, in the presidential election on the Electoral College. Hillary Clinton won the popular vote last time. My view is that we definitely need to re-examine and reform some of these structural issues to make sure that we have a democracy where everybody's vote truly does count equally. That's just one of many things that we need to look at. But the bottom line is, whatever reforms we make, whatever system we have, we need to make sure that we have the votes and focus our efforts around an agenda to move this country forward, to meet those promises that I outlined earlier.
One quick question.
Back to the
Hold on, Dr. Butler.
Go ahead.
This is a very short question. I see the background, all of the books, and I hear you talking. And I want to say, I perceive you to be a very erudite man. Who is your favorite author, fiction and nonfiction?
Who's my favorite author?
Fiction and nonfiction, yes, sir.
Yeah, well, my favorite author, actually, and my favorite philosopher, I've really got two of them. One is Mahatma Gandhi.
Yes, sir.
I spent time in India, and of course, he was an inspiration.
You were born in Pakistan, right?
I was born in Karachi, Pakistan.
All right, now.
Parents for the Foreign Service. And then, Dr. King is known for being, the leader of the movement. But my view is he's equally been a great philosopher, a great moral and political philosopher.
Yes, sir.
And so that is, he is somebody who I read, not just because he's an inspiration on the movement, but because I think he brings together important pieces of philosophy.
Yes, sir.
In terms of fiction, that's a hard one because I love to read a lot of different.
I can see that.
I had more time to do that. I read everything from I think good fiction work to detective novels in my
Yes,
free time.
sir. Okay, I'm sorry for interrupting you, Dr.
Oh,
Oh,
Butler.
no problem. I was on another thing, but I wanted to say it was one thing because you said one of your favorites is Mahatma Gandhi. I do tell people, and I've learned so much more through my travels to the continent of Africa. And I realized because Mahatma Gandhi was one of my idols that I admired. And after my several trips back and forth to the continent um, of Africa, I realized that Mahatma Gandhi was a racist and that his policies in South Africa were to ensure that the blacks of the country were relegated as lower class citizens and that the Indians were more aligned with white people in superiority. And he was very cruel to blacks in South Africa and worked on a lot of rules to keep them segregated, to keep them, I'll say, disenfranchised, and to minimize them to literally less than human. So I tell people now that I caution myself, I learn about the folks in detail, and I don't feel the same currently personally about Mahatma Gandhi anymore because of what he did to people who look like me. And so I just say that as a side note when you said that was one of your favorites, because he used to be one of my favorites too, Senator. And after
Well,
I found out what he did on the continent, and a lot of statues of Mahatma Gandhi have now been pulled down throughout the continent because people now know the history of his racial sentiment towards Black people of the country.
well, Dr. Butler, that's important part of the sort of Gandhi legacy that I'm not familiar with. I will certainly look into that more. As you know, uh, Gandhi was an inspiration to some of the key leaders, the key Black leaders of the civil rights movement, including Dr. King, who frequently invoked Gandhi's name. So I understand the importance of looking at that other part of Gandhi's history, and I will look into it. But I will say that the tactics that he used, the nonviolent tactics that he used to expel the British, colonists from India,
Yes.
I think remain a powerful example for nonviolent political action, and we can learn from him in that regard, as did so many leaders of the civil rights movement.
Yes, yes, and that was why I had such mixed feelings with him, but what he did in South Africa was totally different than what he did in India, and that's why history is so important, and we as African descendants we don't know our history. And our history is not told to us. So I'm really glad with the 400 Commission. Just to let you know, I've been working with them this year and actually last year, just really finding out our history as African descendants of slaves and the continental history, which it has not been afforded to us. And now I used to, as you know, I'm a medical physician now. Now I believe I'm this great seeker of history. I won't say historian, but seeker of history and really putting things in context. So and I love history now. I hated it when in school, but I love it now. And because it really puts a platform to help us mold who we really should and need to be. So I know you have no more time, but the last question, and this is a question that I have been, I've been wanting to push you towards, and I will support 100%. Lastly, do you see yourself running this office for president someday? And I wish you. I'm waiting for you to run, and and you can have Jamie Raskin maybe as your vice president. But I know that's too much, but right, we all Maryland. But please tell us, what are your plans, and do you see yourself running as president of the United States someday?
Well, to Dr. Butler, thank you for the question and the confidence. Right now, my focus is, of course, on trying to make sure we elect Joe Biden and Kamala Harris to the White House. And then I will be up for re-election to the United States Senate in 2022. And, you know, that's obviously very much on my calendar. But I do appreciate the question. You know, I, like some other people, I thought about it briefly this last time around. I think I made the right decision in not running this past election. But in fact, I'm confident I did. But look, I mean, let me just get through my 2022 Senate race and then let's talk.
All right, wonderful, wonderful. Well, Senator
Put you
Crispin
in charge.
Holland. Oh, I will be right there by your side, running, help pushing you, because I would love to see you as my president one day. But I want to thank you so much for your time today. This afternoon or this evening has been, I think, very fulfilling for a lot of individuals. And I really want people to make sure they get out and vote. Could you tell us any last words as far as encouraging people to get out to vote and really hitting that pavement next week?
Well, thank you. And yes, right, we're 11 days to go. Maryland has both early voting, which will start next week. Please make sure you check the times and locations. Make a plan. It's very important you make a plan. All the evidence shows if you make a plan, you're much more likely to actually follow through and vote. And then, of course, there's election day voting. Again, you have to check to see what the nearest open voting place will be. Once you have your plan for Maryland, if you have any additional time and can work with, you know, the Biden campaign or the Democratic Party, they're calling in, they have Marylanders calling into the other key states to urge people in, you know, whether it's Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Florida, other states, to also get out to vote. So please make sure you use your vote, and anybody else that you can encourage to vote. You'll also be a force multiplier for democracy. And thank you for
again,
Dr. Butler.
No, thank you so much. And for all of my viewers out there who are not in the state of Maryland, could you please consider making sure you make a plan to vote, find out where your nearest voting poll is, because we know across the country, voting is not the same as in every state. So make sure, for all the viewers who are not within the state of Maryland, make sure you look to find out where your voting polls are, if there's any requirements additional that have now been put on you to vote. Make sure you're familiar, so when you get there, you can cast your vote. And one other thing I tell people: research. Look at those down county or those down ballot elections. Don't just consider just the president. Look at your state and local officials. Know who you're voting for. Know your judges. Know the different questions and issues and bills they're putting onto your ballot. So please, for all of you out there watching who are not within the state of Maryland and the state of Maryland, please vote, please vote, please vote, and vote with knowledge. Thank you so much. And on behalf of American Africans United, we want to thank you today, Senator Van Hollen, for coming out and speaking with us. And I want to thank my co-host, Invisible Man. This has been a wonderful, wonderful discussion. And once again, I'm going to say, Mr. President, sooner or later, I love you. Thank you. And I will see you soon.
See you soon. Take care. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
your business? Do you want to talk about your nonprofit organization? Do you want to talk about your culture? Introducing the online web TV, Afrique Today. Fogham. You can watch us live at the same time on 4 platforms: Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and using the Afrique Today app. Download our app today for Android or Apple. Promote your business today. For more information, go to www.afriquetoday.com. Afrique Today, the best of digital TV.
L'entrepreneuriat digital vous intéresse-t-il? Vous voulez apprendre à construire des projets digitaux? Aimeriez-vous gagner des revenus passifs conséquents en tout lieu? Voici la plateforme des professionnels du digital, la Diaspo Academy. Ici, vous retrouverez les meilleurs professionnels de la diasporama mondiale connectés sur notre plateforme. Vous allez pouvoir acquérir des formations adéquates qui feront de vous des entrepreneurs digitaux compétents. Étudiants, entrepreneurs, coachs, instructeurs et entreprises, Diaspo Academy est une opportunité pour vous. Elle vous offre la possibilité de suivre votre formation en mode virtuel à partir de chez vous, ou que vous soyez sur la planète. Toutes nos formations disponibles en ligne sont dispensées de manière interactive. Il suffit de vous inscrire et vous pourrez les suivre depuis chez vous. Au cours de la formation, vous passerez des quiz et examens selon votre parcours. En outre, à partir de votre tableau de bord, vous suivrez vos performances et progressions. Vous pourrez aussi communiquer avec vos instructeurs et recevoir des notifications. À la fin de votre parcours de formation, vous recevrez un certificat Diaspo Academy Certified. Que vous soyez débutant ou responsable d'entreprise, Diaspo Academy est une opportunité pour vous. Saisissez-la! Enfin, que vous soyez coach ou instructeur, ayez accès à un millier d'étudiants à travers notre plateforme. Merci de choisir Diaspo Academy, le meilleur choix. Pour plus d'informations, allez sur www.diaspoacademy.com. Diaspo Academy, la plateforme des professionnels du digital.